Greetings, dear listeners. This is Mark.
This is Nitish. Hello.
And you're going to have to listen to us talk about Dune in audio format. Haha.
Yeah, we thought we'd try this out instead.
Yeah, it's more efficient that way because we don't have to edit anything or sit down and write stuff down for too long.
Yes, here we can be a lot less responsible with what we say, a lot more unpolished, but generally put less thought into our work.
Yes, there will be blood.
That's a good movie. Wow.
Yes. But right now we're talking about Dune by Denis Villeneuve.
I think it's Denis. He's
Denis.
French
Oh,
or
well. We talked about pronunciations before the podcast, Nitish, to avoid this predicament.
And I told you it was pronounced Denis Villeneuve.
So, yes. Dune, I'd say, was both of our most anticipated movies of the year. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, looking at Tragedy of Macbeth, that's like a very close second, but Dune took the cake, like, for a long time.
Yeah, for me, it's like, Dune was a lot more than Tragedy of Macbeth, personally, just because it's like, I read the book so long ago, and, I read the book like 8 or 9 times at this time, Mark, and, also, Denis Villeneuve's been my personal favorite director for a while. So, yeah, Blade Runner 2049 is maybe one of my personal favorite movies of all time, so I was really, really looking forward to Dune.
Yeah, and I got a much different background going into this. I have not read the original book. I've not watched any other movies by Villeneuve. I just know that they're really great, and he's a very good director. I was excited about Dune because this seemed like my kind of thing. I'm a big Lord of the Rings person. I'm a big Harry Potter person, big Star Wars person. I like fantasy and sci-fi and all that jazz, the world-building shenanigans. And this really seemed like the next big thing, blockbuster-wise, that we really haven't gotten in a bit. Marvel's been sort of filling that mold for a long time, but, it's been Marvel for a long time. This was something new, but something big.
Yeah, and I think I love Marvel movies, but they kind of are the same movie each time.
Yeah, they don't fill the void.
Right, there's like a similar kind of story beat, there's a similar emotional feel to each movie, a similar big CGI ending, and I think they have their made it with exceptional quality, but I don't think they have the same feel, I guess, as some of them. I mean, obviously there are positive exceptions like Black Panther, but I just don't think any of the Marvel movies get the same operatic quality as does something like Lord of the Rings or Star Wars, if we're talking about these big movie franchises.
Yeah, exactly. Just like having a different thing under a different banner in of itself is very exciting.
Yeah.
And I feel like Dune was something we've been craving for a long time, especially after a year where circumstances have kind of forced more stripped back minimalist-ish productions.
Yeah.
Not to say they're a bad thing, but it's just it's nice to have a bit of pizzazz and fireworks.
Right, and we'll talk about this, absolutely brings the pizzazz and fireworks.
Oh yeah, exactly. Dune met basically all expectations, I feel like, at least on my end.
Yeah, for sure. And I had really high expectations going in, as it's one of my favorite books and one of my favorite directors.
Yeah, Dune is great. Again, it met all my expectations. I would say it personally didn't exceed expectations for me either. It was right up there on Bell Curve, which is still pretty good.
Yeah, no, I agree that it didn't exceed expectations.
But yeah, I think the first thing I wanted to discuss with Dune, though, is just the storytelling of it all and the adaptive capabilities of it all really impressed me. I can't really go into that too much in detail because I have not read the original books. I just know it was considered unadaptable. And even watching this movie, I can sort of see why. There's just so much lore crammed into this little world, so much history you would need to know, so many factions you would need to keep track of. But by God, this movie does such a good job really telling all of that in an efficient, streamlined way.
Yeah, personally, I'm relieved to hear Mark say that, because that was a big question I had as I was watching the movie. It's I know what all of this is because I've read the book a ton, but how would this play to someone who hasn't? And I was really impressed by Denis' decisions to cut back on certain parts of the information. Book fans, he does cut some stuff out, but if you're being honest with yourself, you know that he couldn't have put everything in there. He just couldn't have.
Yeah, exactly. Unless if you get like a Lord of the Rings situation where it's like a 4.5 hour long movie. I'm watching that for the first time right now, by the way, Return of the King.
Yeah, so
I'm really excited.
I will say, I think Dune is actually significantly harder to adapt than Lord of the Rings.
Oh, absolutely.
Because I think a lot of the things in Lord of the Rings that you can cut out are like Aragorn like spends like 5 or 6 pages in Weathertop explaining the story of Feanor and Luthien, or no, Baron and Luthien, for example. You can just cut that out. In Dune, all of the interwoven, all of the extra lore is interwoven with the main plot in a really dense, intricate way, and so it's harder to cut stuff out. So I was really, really impressed by the fact that he managed to have such a deep story while still keeping it legible for first-time viewers.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I feel like a lot of it too is just like I was talking with a friend about this, but like you can even if you don't know like the names of each of the factions or houses or like what they do or like what they're for, and like actually came in 5 minutes late. I just came in having watched the first 5 minutes on HBO and coming back to catch myself up. And but you can already tell like who's who just based off of visual design, which is incredible, and color scheme. Like it's the Blobby faction, Harkonnen.
Yes. Yes.
And there's the Imperial peoples, those squares. There's Atreides, like good guy peoples, etc. Like I can just like tell like from the get go, and it's very easy.
Yeah.
A lot of that's thanks to production design and costuming, which is two like things most people don't think about when going into a movie, but is absolutely essential in telling a fantasy world of this scope. And here, yeah, everyone, and I do mean everyone, is firing off on all cylinders.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, it's just an incredible movie. Though I think the part that like, if anything, and this is the only big thing that comes to mind that might be a little bit limited, and I really want to hear your thoughts on it. I've heard some complaints that Dune is a visually stunning movie in all accounts and technically like amazing, but it lacks a lot of heart that you would find like say The Lord of the Rings or even Star Wars. Well, the good of Star Wars.
Yeah.
But and like I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. And here I don't think it really needs that much, but I can also kind of see it's a little bit dry. There isn't as much of a familial connection. When there's loss, you don't really feel like there's much gain to begin with. I think a lot of relationships I buy, but I don't know, like, if you consider doing the typical hero's journey, right, and it basically is, it was one of the first big revolutionary stories to use the hero's journey mold, or at least in literature, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And, like, that's good. I'm a sucker for the hero's journey. That's my kind of thing. I'll never get tired of it. But if you're going to do it, you need all the steps. And I feel like they were missing that sort of normalcy thing that I feel like we didn't get as much about who Paul is. Because a lot of the movie revolves around Paul and, like, what's on his shoulders. We didn't have as much of the Shire, if you're still using Lord of the Rings analogies. I don't think that's fair, but work with me.
Yeah, so I think part of that, I agree, but I think it's a slightly different paradigm, which I'm evaluating Dune by. Although it does, I think, have the operatic quality of a Star Wars or of a Lord of the Rings, I think actually the best parallel, tone-wise, would actually be Game of Thrones.
Oh.
Just due to the fact that it's a much more cynical tale that's being told. There's betrayal, there's, like, I mean, and there's, like, betrayal, instead of betrayal happening as a sort of, like, one-off, like, part of a much more complicated, like, dynamic, which is generally positive, I think Dune's entire story is set in this conniving political faction where the entire, no one's to be trusted. There's always a threat around the corner. And so I think that changes the tone a little to make it colder. So I think, like, I think it is a different paradigm and that it's telling a darker story. I think not over dark. So there is some heart in the film. Spoiler alert, in between the relationship between Duncan Idaho and Paul. I think you did feel his death. I think it was like a little jarring to see Duke Leto Atreides like taken away like from his family, and I think there's stuff there, But I think with such a large, and I think again I'm gonna use the Game of Thrones metaphor, with the Game of Thrones-esque like cast, because it's massive and they only have 2.5 hours, I think they were limited in the amount of like stuff they could show for each character.
Absolutely. And this definitely seemed like a movie that could have benefited from a longer scale or larger scale.
Or longer runtime.
Yeah. Like, I would kill to see an extended cut version of this movie,
Yeah, totally
which probably isn't going to happen, but, like,
I'd love it.
I would have murdered for it. Like, definitely felt like something was missing, even despite, like, how incredible of a feat this is. But I guess all in all, it's pretty nitpicky. I get what you mean. Like, it's a different tone, and I feel like they emphasized the stuff they really needed to well.
No, I do agree, though, that parts of it felt like, because there is stuff in the book that they just had to cut out due to space constraints.
Yeah, there's
like,
a part 2 coming.
Sure, but, like, even still, like, stuff that happened so far, like, for example, the Dr. Yue,
Yeah.
His side plot, I think, was scarcely mentioned, and there's a chunk devoted into the book where you really learn to feel for him. There's a side plot between Jessica and Gurney Halleck, which is also similarly underplayed. I think they had to use subtle characterizations over like a more full characterization, just because of the fast cast and by then there's time limitations. So I do understand the criticisms, but I think given the fact that they were operating under such limitations, and given the fact that this is just markedly a darker, more cynical story, I recognize the loss but don't feel it as much.
I feel that. Again, like, there's a part 2, and, like, I hear part 2's gonna be, like, a completely different kind of thing. Like, if this is kind of a typical hero's journey right now, like, it's not gonna be that when the story continues. Is that about right? Or at the very least, like, they start playing with more things, so, like, you can feel it going in a more different direction.
I don't want to go into it too much.
Yeah.
Mostly just I don't want to spoil it for you or for anybody who's listening. But, like, I do think there's a lot more there, like, in terms of plot and emotionality in the second part.
Okay, and if that's the case, I think that would make sense. Yeah, because I think... I can definitely tell this is a markedly different story by tone, but thus far not as much by substance. Or theming.
Yeah.
I'm sure that will change. But... all in all, like, again, nitpicks, this is still incredibly well told, like how much lore they were able to squeeze in such a thing. Like, I was able to get pretty much almost everything I needed to the first time around, and I immediately want to go back for a second time to watch it.
For sure, I'd love to, actually.
Yeah.
If that's an invitation.
Oh, yeah. It's on HBO Max, so
yeah.
There we go. And it's just a visually stunning movie. Oh my gosh, the worm.
Yeah.
I haven't been, like, slack-jawed, like, jaw open during a movie in a long time.
Yeah.
Not since, like, the Lightspeed Ram from, like, Star Wars.
Yeah.
The Last Jedi, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, not since that. Like, was I, like, slack-jawed, like, whoa. But when that worm, like, appeared for the first time, I was, like, amazed. And just everything else, too. Like, even beyond the visual effects, which is seamlessly well done. Just production design, like... all the practical effects worked really nicely, and there was a nice reliance on practical effects, right? Looks good.
I think so, yeah.
Actors, like, look good. Costume design, again, I phrased that, looks good. The fact that they filmed in an actual desert means so much.
The shot composition and the lighting is immaculate. It feels like they're using natural light for so much of the film, but they can't be because it's like lasers. The way that the laser was filmed in the scene where they were cutting the door open.
Oh, it looked real.
Yeah, it was so cool. This is like a visual masterpiece. It has all of that sci-fi glamour that you expect from a Blade Runner or from a Star Wars, but also the raw talent of art design, and he's using those rule of thirds, he's using those parallel lines, using those like this very like film school like art composition tricks that you see in a lot of directors, but are elevated by a director like Denis. So that even in the film's most intimate moments where it's stripped back, where it's just a character in a hallway talking, you can still feel that sense of awe that he's like doing everything so well.
It's an art house blockbuster sci-fi flick, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just awesome.
It's right up my alley.
Yeah, and like I was just thinking, like the last time I felt slack-jawed like that, in addition to the worm, was actually from Blade Runner 2049, another Denis Villeneuve movie.
Well, there we go.
So yeah, I love that guy. My other point, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it. So one of the friends I watched the movie with was concerned about whether or not it was like about the white savior narrative, and I actually thought that I think that I have to go back and think about this, and maybe I'll be wrong if I think about it some more. But just on first blush, I think that this is actually does a pretty good job of that, particularly given the fact that despite the fact that the Fremen are villainized by the Harkonnen, I think that the way that they portray Paul as being a humble student of the Fremen's like techniques and culture, and the fact that he's only able to survive by adopting parts of their culture, and the fact that the Fremen have like such a well-founded culture. I think Duncan Idaho mentions at some point how much he respects the Fremen's like craftsmanship, and I think there is like there are many ways in which it does feel like an anti-colonial like
they know what they're
message.
doing.
Right. And just going on the fact that it feels like an Sorry, do you have anything to say on that? What?
I guess to respond to that, yeah, I definitely agree with you. It's something I would probably need more time to think about to be like completely confident in my assertions.
Yeah.
Haha, live recording. But I do think like if anyone like sees this movie and gets the message, the colonialists like are the superior ones. Like I think they just did not pay attention. Like it's clear that like the Freeman, the native peoples of this planet Arrakis.
Mm-hmm.
The planet isn't called Dune, I guess. Where did the dune come from? I guess there are a lot of dunes.
There are a lot of sand dunes.
Ooh, nice. But yeah, like the fact that he does have to learn and adapt is a very, very nice touch. And I think it definitely escapes a lot of the tropes it could have. I'm generally more forgiving when it comes to fantasy, but like a lot of fantasy is guilty of like leaning into the white savior narrative. It's very fascinating. Was this a thing in the original book? Was this a problem? Was this something the movie avoided, or?
So I think the original book was maybe a little was okay. Not maybe, it was worse on gender.
Okay, yeah.
I think it was definitely worse on gender. Decidedly so. But I think the original book was also noted for recognizing the cultural depth of the Fremen and for giving them an interiority which oftentimes fantasy kind of lack.
Okay, there we go. So my theory going into this, and this is the impression I'm getting, is that it's kind of funny. I feel like a lot of fantasy gets accused of like kind of inflating the white savior narrative, and that's because a lot of them do it. It's easy to do, and it's kind of lazy to do. A lot of them probably were inspired off of Dune, but did not get like the substance of what makes Dune interesting.
Yeah,
that's the impression I get. Or maybe it's a movie thing. Either way, when I see the movie, that's like very clearly the case. Like the colonialists like are in this planet, they don't know what's up.
Yeah, and I think there are some plot points which I don't want to reveal that even the most white saviory, most elements of that are actually undercut by some of the deeper lore that I think Denis will start to tease out in the following films. So like, I think there are like some problems. I think it still is, I think, somewhat exotifying, but I think generally speaking, it's like a pretty good tale that sticks it to the man. And this is a final political point, unless you have something to add.
No.
I think so. A movie about foreign powers fighting over somewhat inhospitable territory, I think is an interesting one, given the sort of it's certainly one that we recognize from world history. If you're students of colonialism, you've definitely heard about the story in the past, and I think it's also interestingly timed, given not intentionally, but given the sort of U.S. exit from or withdrawal from Afghanistan. I don't have anything intelligent to say as a comparison between the two, but
it's more or less just like, this is going to be interesting. It's like how like The Social Network is very interesting looking back at it now.
Yeah. Like I don't think I am terrified of the prospect of having to draw comparisons between the two because I don't think there's any way I could do so in an educated way. But I think like having that like just based of like where we're at in the cultural zeitgeist, I think it's impossible to not have that at least a little bit in the back of your head.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Though I guess it was nigh inevitable because like it covers themes like fantasy imitates real life a lot of the times, and like Dune happens to be like based off of like a lot of concepts that like either ended up rubbing off on like how humans do the things in real life, or how the humans do the things in real life ended up rubbing off on the fantasy. Either way, it's an interesting relationship to sort of explore from a meta perspective. But even if that's not your speed, and even if you don't find much depth like into substance, what you'll get is a visually stunning and an audio-y stunningly amazing movie. Like it's a treat to all of your senses,
For sure.
and it's a very well written adaptation to boot.
Yeah. And for book readers, I can co-sign that as a huge fan of the books.
Yeah, Villeneuve is I get the hype, but the fact that he's able to put all these people together encouraged them to like really pop off to the maximum.
Yeah.
Like best director material right here. Like this man knows his craft and should be applauded as such. Like this is amazing, and this is the kind of movie I feel like we've been needing for a while.
Yeah, in addition to having the I am handling so many different things at once kind of idea of like one of the, like Infinity War or something like that, it also has just incredible like an art house feel because like it's the lighting is so beautiful and crisp, and like the shot composition is so immaculate. So it's really like best director in like both that like super Oscar nerdy, like no social life like me and Mark way,
Hey.
but also like best director in the sort of Peter Jackson Return of the King way, in the sense that like he's just doing so much and putting it together and orchestrating it in such an impressive way.
Oh yeah. Honestly, just based off of the Lord of the Rings alone, I would argue Peter Jackson might be the best director of all time, just based off of like that scope he manages to pull off. But like I get both in a sense, like it's just masterfully well done in like both respects.
Right.
It's great stuff. Yeah, I guess out of a final score of 10, what would you give it and why?
So I was gonna start off like before we started this conversation it was 8.5, but like now that we've actually talked about it and like I really got to think about it more, I'm leaning towards like a 9.5.
Hey.
A 9.5 out of 10.
9.5, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I was also leaning like an 8.5. I think I'm going 9 even. It might bump up over time again. I want to see it again, and it might get better the second time around.
Yeah.
My complaints about like the heart issues is still a little bit of a thing. Also, like they do a lot of this thing with the visions where like they keep flashing forward to like other scenes. Honestly, that got a little annoying to me.
Yeah. I got that too.
Yeah, like that's my only like big criticism about it. But like other than that, though, like I think it's a solid 9. Everything else is like immaculately done.
Also, Denis, if you're listening to this, I have no reason why you would be, but if you are, please stop doing the visions things, because in Blade Runner 2049, that was also an issue. Like after major plot revelations, you do this like flashback thing, and like you make amazing movies. You don't need to remind us. We're paying attention the entire time. You're so good at this. Just trust yourself, and like trust us to love you the way you deserve to be loved.
Yeah, though we do love you.
We do
Amazing
love you.
work. Yeah, the vision thing is the only thing. Otherwise, it would be a 10 out of 10 for me. But right now, I'm leaning towards 9 out of 10 before a second rewatch inevitably changes my mind. I do think it's my favorite movie of the year so far.
Yeah.
It's been a little bit of a slow year for movies, if I'm being honest, so far. Maybe that'll change. But honestly, if it doesn't, I'm fine with that. Dune fits pretty comfortably as best of the year material, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think for me, what will make it like a 10 out of 10 movie is if they just added like a little bit more of the plot points, which I knew were in the book, that I think would have helped some of the heart issue.
Yeah.
Just allowing us to empathize with some of the minor characters who end up making really pivotal decisions.
Yeah, but yeah, those are our thoughts. Definitely see Dune either on HBO or on theaters.
No. See it in theaters.
Yeah.
See it in theaters.
Okay, yeah, absolutely see it in theaters. That's like part of the experience, absolutely. But like, and then see it in HBO.
Yeah.
Like, see both.
Watch
like,
it
both
a
are
lot,
nice.
But like this movie was like, it's a thing that people say that this movie's made for IMAX, but this movie was made for IMAX. You need to see it on the biggest screen possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Dune's like an amazing tour de force.
Yeah.
Like, so good. I want to
So
see
good.
it. I want to see it again. You should too. Definite recommendation.
Yeah, same.
And I can't wait to do I reviewed in 250 words on this so I don't come off as a hard ass all the time at movies. I like movies, I swear. I like movies a lot.
I don't. The job of a film critic is to hate everything.
Well, signing off, this is Mark.
This is Nitish. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
What button do we push?
This one.